Welcome to the first episode of whatever the heck this is going to be. Some random bearded guy doing unspeakable things to perfectly innocent pieces of plastic. Okay, so what this is going to be is me showing people how I go about creating some fairly arm's length, decent looking miniatures very, very quickly, and in a sort of a grimdark style. So what I've got here is an Eldar Guardian, very roughly painted, base coats only. I've gone over them with contrast paints, and then I've gone over them with the gloss varnish, which is kind of important to what I'm going to be doing next, because the secret ingredient to what I'm about to do is this stuff, aka streaking grime. Amazing stuff, grimdark in a bottle. So I'm just going to switch off for a minute whilst I get that sprayed liberally onto the miniature. You'll see what I mean in a moment. And poof, just like that. Not like that, not like that, like that, just like that. What we've got is this guy covered in brown stuff like he's just walked into a festival portaloo and it's all gone dreadfully wrong for him. So all I've done there is I've stuck streaking grime through my airbrush. It works just as well off a brush, you'll tend to use a bit more going off the brush, and it's not quite as neat. So this is a reductive technique. What this basically means is I'll be taking this streaking grime off using thinners, or as some painters like to call it, cheating. So standard airbrush thinner. You can use white spirit for this, but if you do, you'll end up high as a kite if you don't use it in a well ventilated area. So do that, kids. That's what this grotty thing is for. This is basically a lens cloth for cleaning my glasses. Not this one, obviously. This one's long past been retired. So what I do is I dip that in the thinner and then just gently wipe away from the miniature the grime, and you start to see the original colour that was underneath. This is a bit of a time-consuming process if you want to get it right, but it's also very, very, very easy, which is why people tend to call it cheating. The way I look at it, if it gets the result you want and it saved you some time, so what? It's not really cheating, is it? All you're doing it by doing it the long way, really, is cheating yourself out of time, which nobody has in abundance these days, do they really? So you can see how that grime is starting to come away from the miniature, leaving a bit of stuff in the actual recesses. It's like doing a wash but in reverse, I suppose. You're just cleaning it off the raised areas to reveal what's underneath, and it will get stuck in the deepest recesses. If you're trying to get into a more precise area, what you can do is you can just fold up your cloth a bit, and that'll give you a firmer point to actually work with. And then you can go in again like that, and you end up with this really cool sort of, because I've gone over, I think it was Wraithbone I went with in the end, you end up with this really cool, really sort of aged bone effect that just, in the case of this Eldar, makes it look like he's really seen some action. And you don't often see the grimdark style with Eldar, because they tend to have a very sort of clean finish to them. That seems to be how they're done mostly. But I really like the grimdark style. It fits with the universe and the setting. And plus, doing it this way, you can knock out a fairly decent looking, at arm's length, fairly high contrast army in a very small amount of time, which again is the name of the game. less time faffing over your miniatures and more time playing. But if you can faff a little bit and get a really decent effect, why the heck not? So I'm going to carry on doing this and cut away for a bit, and I'll show you the finished model in a bit. And shazam! Right, the keen-eyed amongst you will notice something has changed, and that's that I've got rid of my old cutting mat, which I use for airbrushing on, and I'm back to my clean, well, moderately clean painting surface that I usually use. This contraption is of a wet palette, but I use the surface as, I don't know whether you've seen in other videos, a textured dry brushing surface. This is basically just covered in old paint, but it works really well for picking when you're getting working the paint into your dry brush and getting paint off it. Right, so here is the finished miniature, which looks good at an arm's length, which is entirely what you want. There's a good amount of contrast there, which really pops on the table. Now from there, obviously you can go in with your teeny tiny brushes and do all the elevating of highlighting and picking out little things like the soul gem in the middle of her chest. Here's her Eldar, who knows, her chest, I think. And pick out little bits of gold and whatever else you want to do, and just elevate it as much as you want, actually, as much time as you want to spend. But as a basic paint job, I don't think that's too bad, and that'll sit quite happily on a playing surface and look good all day long. And in a reference that will be lost on most of the international audience, here's one I painted earlier, which is another alternative belt and scheme. Now, I mentioned earlier about gloss varnish. If you coat everything in gloss varnish, you'll be able to get most of the streaking grime off, which is what I've done here. On her, definitely another her, I've used a matte varnish, which means you can get a lot of it off, but not quite as much, and it leaves a bit more of a tint on the white and light coloured areas. You don't have to use a glare varnish at all. But if you do that, again, you're going to get more of a tint on the light areas, and you'll be able to get even less of the grime off. So I would suggest using the gloss on a light coloured miniature like that. It doesn't matter so much if the main colour you've got there is dark. Right, I think what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to finish off the bases with some Geek Gaming Scenics base ready terrain mix, and call them done. So I hope that's been helpful for you, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.